I am here with Joshua Rayner Gold, which is super exciting because I only recently started following you on Instagram and I'm living for your posts. I am a huge proponent of healing through high quality animal protein. I mean, I preached that the first thing I fed my son was pate. He only ate animal based food for the first few months that I started feeding him. And it's slightly controversial with the people that I serve, but I'm really steadfast in this. And in healing my autoimmune disease, I almost went exclusively carnivore, and it's been the majority of what I eat to this day. And so obviously your Instagram is all about this, and so I knew I just had to get you on here and pick your brain.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people get drawn to or approach these various diets because they're trying to, fix an issue or recover from something. And then it sort of really blossoms from there as you realize that there's sort of like um, a what we might refer to as a more like normal experience of health, that the average maybe more average common experience, and then people realize how much power they have to elevate everything about their body, their mind, their spirit, their lives, from taking nutrition from more of a negative kind of approach to what you don't eat versus a positive approach about like what you do eat. And that has, from my own personal experience and people I've worked with, and all these people we see online, they've completely changed their lives by changing what they eat.
Mm. Oh, yeah. I mean, I say this all the time, food is medicine. And I went from taking so many pharmaceuticals to being able to ditch those and allow my body to get back into homeostasis on its own, through the nutrition that I was putting in my body. And it's everything to me now. But what I'd love to learn from you is, how did you even get into this space? Like, what made you so passionate about this in the first place?
Well, I mean, I've been really interested in nutrition for as long as I can remember. From the most basic part of just being a little kid and loving to eat food. I was always notorious for how much food that I ate. Granted, it wasn't necessarily always the best quality stuff, but when I was in elementary school, and we had like our pizza day or something. It would, like, I would be doing whatever I could to get other people's pizzas, and it would come with a little chocolate chip cookie, and it's like Josh being Josh again, like trying to just go all about the food. And when I got into high school and I started, taking sports more seriously, and getting in like the weight room for football and stuff, I became one of the few ones who really focused on the nutrition approach, where most of my friends just they did whatever the coach had them do in the gym, and then that was the last they thought about it. Whereas I was going home and like getting protein shakes and drinking a pint of ice cream every night to gain weight, kind of a thing. So then when I got into college, eventually one of my gym buddies at school dragged me over to CrossFit, and then I was introduced to paleo. And paleo was the first time that I had the perspective of looking at food as, there are some foods that we are supposed to eat. And up until that point, everyone goes like, okay, junk food, soda, Taco Bell, probably less healthy, and then eating like chicken and vegetables or something. But that word healthy is sort of very vague. And so the perspective of going, some foods are more proper for humans, some foods our body are designed to eat. And so from that point on, a little over 10 years ago, every approach that I've had has been through that paleo perspective of what foods should we eat? What foods are we supposed to eat? And that has sort of navigated me through, you start looking into, like the history of hunter gatherer and then agriculture, and when foods became introduced, and then when they did, what did we do to them to make them more edible and less harmful. And that's just sort of been my approach, and it's taken certain extremes of being super super keto low carb to eating very high carb and then eating carnivore altogether, and then now with eating the majority of my foods raw. It really has been this navigation of finding what is the most appropriate approach to take to give me as much health as possible.
I find it interesting because I just a quick one. Your microphone is a little bit in your.
No, sorry.
You're good. I find it interesting because I've seen your videos of eating a lot of raw meat, especially one that came on my feed is you eating an entire chicken raw. Um, when did you start doing that?
So I started eating raw, I would say 8 years ago. I mean,
Wow.
I certainly was eating sushi as a kid, but it was 8 years ago that I started eating all my liver raw. Well, I'd say I'd started eating liver in the first place, and then I've only really eaten liver raw. I've probably only eaten it cooked a handful of times. Um, and so yeah, the 8 years ago, I remember because I had sort of been in that like kind of uh, I would say kind of your more common paleo perspective of, oh, if it's eat if it's fat, um, and like don't eat it if it's carbs, basically. Like, okay, meat and bacon and stuff, and then you know avoiding more carby foods. And then in 2013, I came across the Weston A. Price stuff and started learning more about the concept of how much actual nutrients are in certain foods and more nourishing yourself. And so I started looking into raw milk and raw eggs, and I came across stuff about organs and liver. And so I started playing with that a little bit, and I started also working in some raw beef, but it wasn't really a focus. It was just like something that I would do when I was in the mood for it. I still had this fear that if I was eating raw beef, raw meat every day, that something bad would happen. But it was just like a disconnect because I didn't really understand. I just sort of had a very narrow perspective. So somehow I was justifying eating liver raw, but if I ate my steaks raw every day, I'm like, okay, well maybe the steaks get handled weirdly, so there's some contamination. Because what we're told is that it's not safe. So in my head, I just thought, oh, it must not be safe to consume in large amounts. Um, and so that sort of was where I was at for a while. I would, eat steak tartare and other raw dishes, but I never had a large consumption of raw foods outside of the raw milk, raw eggs, and raw liver until about a year ago when, after being kind of doing like a more strict carnivore thing, I started to see people on Instagram doing something that looked kind of carnivore-ish, but eating a lot of raw foods. And one thing I noticed about these people was that when you look at a picture of their face, um, you know, nutrition is usually sold with the body. We see people with like shredded six packs, and you go, okay, that's got to work, right? And so a lot of people in the carnivore and keto spaces are very lean and muscular, but if you like look closely at the face itself in the eyes, you can see a sort of, they look like drained, they look tired, they tend to look a little bit more drier and wrinkly. There's like almost a look of stressed out on their faces, and I think that comes from all the cortisol, and a lot of them drink a lot of coffee and stuff. But then when I saw these people who ate raw, they were glowing. There was a rosiness to the cheeks, there was a light in their eyes. And so I started just kind of, really overnight, because I'm just sort of an extremist with everything that I do. I went from, occasionally eating a raw steak to just kind of going all in. And for myself, where I've never really had chronic issues as far as symptoms, my whole, I don't know, problem was always just centered around my digestion itself, issues with bloating, or kind of different edges of the spectrum of bathroom problems. Um, and so when I switched to carnivore and I went, oh my god, I'm not bloated so much anymore. And then when I ate meat more raw consistently, everything sort of just went away almost instantly. Um, the amount of like reduction, it seemed like the effectiveness of my digestion, like, I would eat 4 pounds of meat in a sitting, and it would just feel like I hadn't eaten anything. That was sort of what made my mind go, okay, there's something clearly here, that the bloating is now completely gone, and I don't have to worry about, fasting or starving myself in order to just get some digestive relief.
Wow. Do you know why? Because I feed my baby raw camel and raw cow milk. I've always fed him raw milk. I nursed him for a while and then I switched on to raw camel. And then here in the UK, it's really good actually because the cows are all very healthy. The animals are super healthy. And I know all the farmers and we get really good raw milk. And I was told, no, don't ever, touch raw milk. Um, why are we sold that? Why is everyone so scared, like you said, of anything raw?
Well, all of this, the narrative about all this is all centered around bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea that bacteria is the cause of problems. And so, I mean, you really have to take it back to kind of like the beginning of germ theory to like understand that perspective. And so, once like Pasteur's work took off, everything came out through the germ theory lens. And our entire medical industry is built upon this. And people will challenge me on it and say that I'm like, you know have it backwards and I'm wrong, and I'm going against the entire medical industry. And I'm just like, yeah, that's the point. I'm going against the entire medical industry and the entire system that we've set up, um, in that from that perspective. So like I completely reject the concept of the germ theory, and I'm more of a fan of terrain theory. So some people, like if you just say that, like they'll cut you off right there and they won't listen to anything else you have to say. But I don't care. I just care about whatever the truth is. Like one
Yeah,
way or the other doesn't serve me anymore. I'm just trying to find what real health is.
right.
Um, so everything is focused on this fear of microbes, right? Which is why they push this concept of germs, bacteria, viruses. Like that's kind of the narrative, and it's this kind of fear-based approach, but it really also like doesn't understand um, the mechanisms at play. It's a very um, almost like naive perspective on it, and so everything sort of comes from there. And so if you think that bacteria cause disease, then whenever you see bacteria, you're going to try to destroy the bacteria. So that's why milk is pasteurized, all the meat is cooked. The idea is the focus on neutralizing the bacteria is a very important part of what they think health is. And so if you go on like the FDA, the website, or you look at their social media, they have a lot of really repeated messaging about bacteria being bad, more so than they're saying telling you what health is. Like I remember it was a few months ago, and the reason why I had got it, I noticed it was someone had sent me a post, and it was like National Cookie Day or something like that. And so you have the Food and Drug Administration, which is seemingly supposed to be about our health, but if you think about it, it's from that same negative perspective, or all that they do is they say what you can't do. All they do is they tell you what is not legal to sell, what you shouldn't eat. Um, so here they are, and they're posting a picture of a plate of chocolate chip cookies, and they're like the worst looking chocolate chip cookies ever. Like they definitely weren't made at home by like your grandma or something, right? They look like they came from a box. And the caption was uh, like happy National Cookie Day. All you need is a glass of pasteurized milk to protect you from the bacteria in raw milk. So like the whole post is actually centered around, not like it's anti raw milk propaganda, as opposed to you know eat cookies, or why is the FDA even promoting eating cookies?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's such a crazy thing. And then I was scrolling through their more recent post, and like every other post was about bacteria. Like there's a picture of chicken, and they say, uh, actually, don't wash chicken because you'll spread bacteria all over your kitchen. When you're eating barbecue, make sure you cook it to a certain temperature to kill the bacteria. and it's at some point, well, originally you kind of think like, okay, these people don't understand how this works, and then you go, they're really, really pushing this stuff, and it's kind of weird how much they're focusing on it.
Mm,
And all of the like, if you try to think about things through an ancestral perspective, a historical perspective, an evolutionary perspective, you can even think at it through a biblical perspective. Anything that is looking towards the past to inform our present and then our future. There was no such thing as like a sterile environment. People, uh, you hunt an animal and it's brutal, and you drag it back and it's covered in dirt, and yeah, I mean, you may or may not have cooked it, but there's bacteria all around us all the time. It's vital for life. You can't have any form of life without bacteria. And then somehow we think that now we're in a world where everything needs to be like sterilized, right? To like there was a trend on Twitter this last week where people were talking about washing chicken, and a lot of people apparently wash their chicken with like soap or bleach, and it's
no.
just this, it's this. I mean, it's wild to think about that we're now to the point where people are completely rejecting anything that's natural, and
Hmm.
that only the unnatural can be good. Only the synthetic can be
Hmm.
good. The way that anything is supposed to work, whether it be the body, whether it be the immune system, whether it be our farming practices, the soil, everything has to be this synthetic process as we take extract all the life out of things and leave it sort of this dead, sterilized system. And so there's a to go back to the milk kind of question. There's a reason why it's called pasteurized because of Louis Pasteur. And so you actually need to go back and look at what was happening. What Go back to France in the 1800s and look at the work that he was doing and what the environment he was in. And there's a book, I forget exactly which name is first, but it contrasts Pasteur with another scientist named Antoine Béchamp, and they were both doing the same work, and they came to opposite conclusions. And so I think the book is called Béchamp versus Pasteur, and it's juxtaposing the germ theory versus the terrain theory. That one, that bacteria cause disease, and the other that it's the terrain of the host, the body, that is the sort of creator of the disease. And so it's I kind of harp on milk a lot because one, I think it's like a really important food, both for its health and what it kind of more means to have something like dairy source, right? It's a very consistent source of food, but it really was this kind of point of focus on the attack of our health, that they have the perspective of what food is and what health is backwards, and they took one of the most health promoting foods there is, like as mammals, right? Mammary, that's milk, the most kind of fundamental thing of the mammalian experience, and they killed it, they sterilized it.
Mm,
And every sort of pediatric type thing would tell you to make sure that you would never boil your breast milk before you were to give it to your baby. And then
mm.
we think that we're going to boil some other milk and have it for ourselves or give it to our children, and somehow that's going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I I see a functional medicine pediatrician with my baby, and I kind of got the down low on the whole, starting with pate. To this day, he eats tons of pate, and then everything raw, cheese, raw milk, raw, all of that, which I would have never known. I do my own research. I'm a bit of a research junkie, but I think like I wouldn't have been able to decipher just exactly how beneficial and how much it's setting him up to start in this way. But I think that there's so many questions I have about what you just said. Okay, so tell me this then. You switching over to like raw beef and raw chicken. Have you ever gotten sick?
I mean, I have been sick in that time, but I haven't like eaten something and then it made me sick.
That's amazing.
um, yeah, it's interesting because of what we think being sick is,
Mm,
right? Being sick, and what we usually mean by that is I have these symptoms. What that is that is not. that is healing, right? The symptoms are what heals you, which is why the symptoms are all like they're expulsions. It's sneezing, coughing, vomiting, diarrhea. It's all get out, right? Like even like the fever and like sweating, it's all removing things from the system. And so we think of getting sick, I got it. It like I received this thing, it attacked me and it caused me to be ill. As opposed to my body did what it's supposed to do and it rid my body of, these various forms of toxicity. Um and so, getting not getting sick in any way, shape, or form for a really long time is not a good sign because it means that your body is never expelling any form of toxins. The concept of a flu, these colds and flus, everyone knows that they're seasonal. And they go, "Oh, the you spend more time indoors because it's colder and then you're more huddled with other people." But then, it's like, well, where did the thing come from in the first place? It has to start somewhere. Um, and so what it really it's like, okay, that fall season, the trees are losing their leaves, right? They're shedding their leaves. You have like reptiles that shed their skin. We have to have a cyclical form of shedding, of getting rid of what we've accumulated. And so we think about getting sick as this bad thing, but assuming you aren't in this chronic illness because you keep putting toxic things in your body, you should be grateful to be sick. Like to have like they call it like a healing crisis, like an episode where your body is like really beat down for a day. I mean, usually, like, think about whenever you've had a fever in your life and you're really beat down for a couple days, you usually feel like phenomenal coming after it. You feel like refreshed. It is not this negative experience that we think, oh, I had these uncomfortable symptoms. People never want to feel anything that resembles discomfort in any way, shape, or form. Even if that is the path towards success, people don't want to deal with a struggle. And so our whole medical system is this allopathic model where we take a medication which stops our symptoms. And if you think about the idea of the symptom being a way of getting something out, if you stop that, then you've just left it in your body and now it's continuing to do damage to you.
It's so, so, so true. I mean, one of the most powerful things that I've done in my entire life is, and I would never recommend that someone just stop taking their pharmaceuticals out of nowhere. But for me, I was so numbed from all of the pills that I was the pill for an ill allopathic model that we're talking about. And I was like, I just want to feel what is it that my body is trying to communicate to me. And in stopping all the medication, I was able to feel for once what it is that my body was saying. I was able to tune into my intuition. And yeah, these issues were chronic, but it was only a matter of months before I actually fully healed without the medications. And it's that constant process of pill for ill, that like people are so scared to feel anything at all. It's like you get a little tiny headache and it's like Tylenol, Advil, whatever it is, get a fever. Oh my God, it's so dangerous. Let's suppress it. Let's suppress it. And no one really knows what anything means. Nobody knows that it's your body communicating or detoxing. And it is totally backwards.
Yeah, it's I've never heard that pill for ill thing, but that's good. But yeah, it really is. It's like you get a symptom and then it's like a band-aid. It's always just a band-aid without ever healing the thing. And so that perpetuates this model of being a customer for life, right? You can never take your health into your own hands. You're always reliant on them for something. Here's this pill, here's this this injection, here's this treatment, and then now we have you as a recurring customer and you have to keep coming back to us. um, and it starts with the things like the Tylenol and the Advils type stuff, which is, oh, if you have a headache, you need to make it go away, instead of, why did you have a headache in the first place? Why are you so dehydrated? Right? Your body is giving you signals constantly, and all we do is numb ourselves to the signals because we don't like what they're telling us. But you can disable the check engine light on your car, and you go, oh, my guess my engine's, but it's like, no, you just turn the light off. At some point your car is going to break down, and you went, oh shit, I don't know what to do now. um, and so our, you know, the one of the things I really don't like about how our medical industry talks to people and treats people is that they make everyone to be, you're like a victim of your circumstance. Like, oh, you just had bad genetics, or you just had a bad, roll of the dice, luck of the draw. It didn't work out well. When how we how we um, how we look at the idea of both like disease from that sort of pathogen perspective and the kind of genetic thing is that this is something that just, it was random and that's just the way it is, as opposed to the fact that our bodies never actually make a mistake. Like, the in the last year or so, you've been seeing a lot of social media posts, people talking about thalidomide and what it did to children, right? Where they're missing their whole arms and their hand starts at the shoulder. And people, they might recognize that it was disease that caused it, but it's not a mistake, because if you think about it, the body still did whatever it could to figure out how to like form that process. Like, it didn't just leave like a gaping open hole, it made it closed. It did whatever it could with its resources and its sort of instruction, its coding, to to make the best kind of solution. And so the body is always working for you. It just doesn't always have what it needs to do the job. But it always does the job, though it's just not always what it's supposed to be. And so the everything that your body experiences, the symptoms, whether it be something as like aggressive as um, you know, like completely deteriorating disease, of very visible symptoms, like skin lesions, things where you're starting to break down, what we think of a lot as the autoimmune stuff, or kind of the more less visible things like digestive issues or mood swings or brain fog, stuff like that, headaches. This is all the process that your body is doing to um, get through to the other side of it. It wouldn't do it if it didn't need to do it, because it's just, that would be a waste of whatever resources it did have. And the I really don't like how the autoimmune thing is sort of laid out for us, that, oh man, my body is just attacking itself. Your body would never do such a thing. That your body is not your enemy. You are just dealing with so much toxicity that in order to get rid of it, it has to do a little bit of self harm to get through there. And if you don't support it properly, and you don't stop the incoming exposure to what's harming it, then it's going to seem like your body's killing you. But your body's trying to save you. It just might kill you like in the process of doing it.
I mean, it resonates with me so much. And I just made like a series of TikToks on this yesterday. Especially because I work with so many people in the autoimmune community, and Graves' disease, which is a thyroid autoimmune disease. I've been told so many times, like, oh, well, you just had dealt a shitty stack of cards, or your body's fighting itself. And it's when I finally stepped into, actually, my body's always working for me. My body's always working to heal me. That's all it's ever trying to do. And that I have the power within me to do that. Like you said, I don't need to be a customer who's broken, but like I can heal myself. I have the tools, and like no one has more intelligence than my body to do that. My intuition, if I can tune into that and listen to that. And I think that narrative that like you're broken or you are disempowered, I mean, you just can't. You can't physically heal if you believe that your power is taken away. And so many people are searching, 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 spending on all of these crazy expensive. I mean, my clients are like, I spent 60 grand at this clinic that is just
Yeah.
blows my mind, only to tell me that, yeah, well, you still have a shitty deck of cards, but you're in this experiment that we're doing and whatever. And 10 pills later, you still feel like crap. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to me. It really, and it shocks me every time I get a new client and I get the same story, and I'm like, I should be used to this by now, but I'm shocked every time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that it's the system is, it's a predatory model, right? They want you as a customer, and so they look for vulnerability or weakness, and they go, "Oh, you have this problem. Um, let's. This is what we're gonna do." And none of the things that they do actually are going to fix the problem. They are going to, make you feel better. They're just all they're doing is because they only look at symptoms, all their solutions are symptom based. So it's like you have a symptom, let's cover up the symptom. Or if something is not so much what it's trying to take away, but what it's trying to give you, it's like, okay, let's just give you a symptom. Like that, like the story about Viagra, right? Like it was supposed to be like a blood pressure medication. It's like, oh, look at this side effect that we like. So you just take this, and again, you're never actually considering, well, why is it doing that thing, and then what problems could arise from the normal mechanisms being bypassed. And so when you there's the what was it who was the one who I think it was Hippocrates who said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." Like these concepts are not new, but it's what the truth has always really been. And that's why I named my company Animal Food Plant Medicine, because it's sort of this idea where the animal foods provide the building blocks. They are what nourish you. That's where like the nutrition itself really comes in. Whereas the plant foods are more providing like a medicinal effect. They're stimulating you in various ways. Um, and so my girlfriend, she's actually an herbalist, right? And so that is older knowledge of how plants work, and it's in a more traditional form without the inclusion of all these other ingredients and chemicals and factory processes, where they find an herb that works, and then they take a little bit of that thing and they put it in a pill that's mostly a bunch of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the all the herbalist approaches are understanding the mechanisms of the body. So it's like, okay, well, this does this thing and this does that thing, but you wouldn't want to do this with that. And so it's part of a full kind of spectrum approach, as opposed to like, well, I pop this pill, I pop that pill. um, and so when people can take what they eat on a daily basis, and they can both build themselves up with the proper animal foods, and then stimulate themselves properly with the necessary plant foods, then you sort of come into this harmony of a system that is all encompassing, and it goes like to build itself together. And so when um, you have like the extremes, like let's juxtapose like vegan and carnivore on opposite end. um, I know from my experience with carnivore, like it's very effective at doing what it does, but carnivore is not supposed to be a long-term solution.
Right.
It's a temporary process to go through, I mean, one, feed yourself like really good animal based foods, and give yourself good nutrition, but largely to remove any of the possible irritants or things that are, any food that's processed, even if you're kind of just going for a more general diet. um, but there's a if you follow Rob Wolf at all, he used to have the autoimmune paleo protocol, which was removing like nuts, avocados, coconuts, nightshades, things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
as carnivore became more popular the last few years, he said, in actuality, the best autoimmune protocol would have always been carnivore. Um, but it's an alleviation of of the problem. It's not the solution to the problem.
Right.
And so one of the things I really like about this perspective of eating raw is that what you're doing is you're giving yourself an abundance of nutrition from various food groups, even if they're mostly animal based. And so instead of something like, oh, I can just eat ribeyes every day and I'm fine, I can get by. But I don't want to get by. I want to thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, then if you're going like from the vegan perspective, especially if they do like a raw vegan approach and they don't eat a lot of foods that really harm the digestive system, it's focused more on things like fruit and juices and stuff. if you look at those people, they often do heal a lot. You can see like, they detox a ton. You can see a little bit of glow to them as well. You could see a brightness in the eyes. But then the system deteriorates because they're not actually getting sufficient nutrition. And so this is kind of like, oddly enough, it's like a mix of carnivore and raw vegan at the same time. And so when you're getting when you're looking at a piece of meat and you're not going like, this is protein and some fat, but this is an abundance of these beautiful fat soluble vitamins. So instead of thinking like, oh, what am I'm trying to lose weight, so like, let's lower the fat, let's make it leaner. No, no, no. I want to give myself an abundance of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K. I want to, eat tons of butter, right? Let's go tons of butter, tons of raw milk, these foods that have, tons of minerals and all these vitamins and cofactors which are so vital to giving ourselves. It's like we're filling up, we're overflowing our nutrient stores because we live in this. Our modern world is the malnourished and overfed at the same time.
Hmm.
And so because everyone is thinking about nutrition as far as, I'm trying to lose weight, they will take away their health in order to take away, some amount of their body. When it's really, you need to give yourself everything it needs and more to recover, and then you need to find that balance. And so with the inclusion of, the meats, fishes, chicken, pork, game, whatever it is, the dairy foods, and then you include a select amount of plant foods from that paleo perspective, what doesn't cause problem, right? What is not going to irritate the system? And so I like a lot of juices. I like a lot of fruit. Um, I might do some potato if I'm like training really hard and I need the carbs to do what it is that I'm doing. And when I find myself in that place, it's a very uh, balanced. There's a calmness to it because I'm not sort of hitting these swings from these extreme ends.
Mm.
I feel like, I feel on one end you have anxiety, the other end you have depression. It's this kind of, you're in that middle of where you don't really have either, and you're balanced on both ends. So it's the inclusion of the animal foods, the plants which work more as medicine, which kind of gives you that kind of like unique place where a human should be, as omnivores, to give us as much health as we could possibly have.
I love that. And it made me wonder, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but from an ancestral perspective, how did we, like, what percentage of our plate did we evolve eating as meat? Like, if, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, the concept of a plate is not really like yeah, it's a
Right,
very recent
right, right, right.
invention, right? And so I mean, the problem when you're looking back at things like this far back, that's not something as like, okay, let's go dig up these remains and analyze, what the bones tell us. We're trying to guess what their practices were, which is just, it's very, very difficult to do such a thing.
Yeah.
Um, but if you look at the way that, we have animals to sort of look to inform us, right? And so when you look at carnivorous animals, they don't eat every day, right? They lounge around and they lay in the sun and they just hang out having a good time. And then when it's time for the hunt, they hunt it down, and then everyone gorges themselves on, one, they go straight for the organs first. They always eat the guts out. I have this incredible picture of a lion, and its head is actually, you can see its face through the butt of a zebra because it ate its way all the way through.
Wow.
um, and and then like you're like, oh man, and then your belly's really full, and then you're going to lay around for another couple days. And so when you look back at, what our studies do try to tell us, it says that we were like apex predators for 2 million years. um, and it was, eating the organs, the bone marrow, which was vital in growing the size of our brain. And then it was, I've been getting into these various theories more as I've just sort of been exploring different concepts that most people might not think of being related to food, but I think of food as kind of being like the fundamental singular part of what creates like culture and people in
Mhm.
society, especially as we're looking at a time where our world is sort of like seemingly falling apart.
Yeah.
Because animals don't really have what you'd call, maybe you wouldn't think that they have culture, but they all have eating practices, and so they have a culture. Um, and so the idea of food as being like the most important resource, like that's the truest thing, that what money seeks to represent is resource, and food is the most important one. And so if you look at uh, the kind of trajectory of hunter gatherer into agriculture, a lot of vegans will say, something to the effect of, "Oh, we eat too much meat. You never would have been able to get that much meat." Well, if there's woolly mammoths everywhere, it's really not hard to find a ton of meat to feed your entire tribe of people. And it's a
Mm.
ton of fat and all that goodness. You kill one and you're going to be gorging for a really long time. And so I think it's really more of um, a flexible and seasonal approach, that it would make most sense to eat as much animal food as we could get, right? That's always the most valuable. And then, seemingly in times of scarcity, we would look to the plants when we were deficient. And so, if you look at it, like, someone who's living off just fruit alone will really deteriorate very, very quickly. The fruits, especially like the citrus fruits and stuff, they're very like astringent. The acidic things are they're solvents, and so the body is quite literally like detoxing very, very aggressively, and so that body's going to break down.
Mm.
Whereas if you're eating nothing but potatoes, you could live and sustain off of, I mean, there's literally people eat, like, that's like a certain nutritional approach, is eating a mono diet of just boiled potatoes. Potatoes are a very complete food on the plant side, and it can sustain you for, a decent amount of time. And while I don't recommend it, I think that sort of shows how the that's where, in my opinion, the introduction of fire really came in, is that starches aren't edible unless we apply fire to them.
Mm.
And so in times where our meat became scarce, and that really usually meant that we hunted them so well, that these larger animals became extinct. We went a little, as humans are, we're greedy, right? So we killed all the animals off, and then now there's so much more scarcity that we had to look to making these starchy foods more edible. So it makes sense to kind of have like a meat and kind of fruit season, like in the spring and summer, and then as you go into fall, more of like a meat and kind of like a potato season, right? Because we know that produce is seasonal.
Mhm.
um, and I think for most people, keeping meat and the plant foods separate can often be like a good thing, especially with like keep the meat and fruit separate, keep the meat and starch separate, even though that goes against the concept of like sitting down and having like what we consider to be a meal. Most people's digestion works a lot better if they don't eat their meat and their potatoes in the same meal, because you're sending conflicting signals to the body, where, okay, so if I'm going to eat a starch, then that means my saliva, my amylase is working like right away, and then when it gets down to the gut, my stomach acid doesn't need to be super strong, I need more worry about enzymes. Whereas if I'm eating meat, then the it doesn't nothing really happens outside of the main focus of the stomach acid. And so when you send these different signals, you're kind of like you're confusing the system. And so the healthier that you are, the more you can get away with. And so I think that's why these various diets that are very restrictive work really well, because they send like one
Mm.
signal at a time by keeping these foods separate. Um, but I mean, I think as far as like when people think about, oh, should I eat more carbs, fewer carbs, the center of, you might call it a plate, but I just think of like the entire approach to nutrition should be animal foods. And there's could be, some people need more red meat, some people need more white meat, shellfish, organs. These things offer different benefits, and so people need to allow their body to give them signals, right? To not numb themselves with the signals and play with these different things. And then the plant things sort of become these extras, right? It's a there's a reason why meat is not a side, right? The meat is the main course, and then
Mm.
the plants are the side. And so you kind of figure out how to fit these little things in to kind of, it's the garnish, right, of the nutritional approach, whereas the meat is the centerpiece.
And what is the most, like, the top three most nutrient dense parts of an animal, if you had to
Um,
pick?
so I mean, everyone says liver, and
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with that. Right,
Mm-hmm.
with liver, you're talking about the most like potent source of vitamins and minerals that we can think of. It's extremely high in vitamin A. It has vitamin D, which is great, especially now as like we're going into winter. People take vitamin D supplements, which I think are very harmful. It's very high in zinc and copper, which most people are deficient in. Um, Zinc and copper are like vital for your hormone production.
Mm-hmm.
So if as a man your testosterone isn't where it needs to be, it's very often a zinc deficiency. If you're as a woman and your body isn't producing enough progesterone, it's very often a zinc deficiency for how zinc plays into the follicular and luteinizing hormones. Um, Copper is really important for like your hair graying, for your tissue to kind of look like vibrant. Like one of the nutrition coaches who I'm a big fan of, her Instagram handle is Nutrition Elements. She says that for women, if you fix your copper deficiency, your breasts will be perkier. Like it really is like this, like
Wow.
um, this almost like youth kind of thing, right? Like your hair will not turn gray, your skin will be tighter and more full. um, and so it really is like this wonderful food. And so liver being this central thing, being one of the first foods that you feed your child once they start going to solid foods, I think the addition of liver is a great, like, really place to start. And I kind of like adjacent to liver, I put raw oysters. Um, Oysters are also very high in zinc and copper, funny enough. And they're also high in selenium and iodine. And so when you look at like cultures, they either had ruminant animals or they had seafood. And seafood specifically more important than the fish themselves. And so um, your nutritional approach is not complete in my perspective if you don't have either like a dense source of organs, or you don't have a dense source of shellfish, oysters, clams, various mussels, shrimp, lobster, crab. They are much more nutrient dense, very high in minerals. And so it's kind of, it doesn't have to be an either or, it could certainly be both, but it kind of shows you that regardless of the environment, the climate that you're in, there is a food source that kind of solves the problem.
Mm.
So if you live nowhere close to the ocean and you can't get good seafood, then there should be plenty of farms around where you can get organs, you can get liver, kidney, heart. Usually those are the most available. Um, and then if you live on the coast and you live in a little island community or something, there's going to be seafood close by. So I kind of put those two in a special place. And then I think raw dairy is kind of like, if you want to put those like three foods. And the thing about raw dairy that's great is that when you talk about raw dairy, you're talking about kind of like a million different foods. Like
Mm.
it's the milk, it's the butter, it's the cream, it's the cheese, it's yogurt, all of these things that you can make. And and again, like, because we're talking about foods that are raw, you are getting this abundance of enzymes and bacteria in you that are going to promote health. And specifically, especially because dairy is a problematic food for people, they're going to promote the ability to digest dairy. um, I post about milk a lot, and I had one recently kind of explaining how what the role of lactase is in the raw milk, and that when you pasteurize it, you're killing off these enzymes that digest milk itself. And so lactose intolerance isn't really what we think it is.
Mm.
And so when you consume raw dairy, if you have milk and you have yogurt, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the natural bacteria that's occurring in the milk, which produces the enzymes required to digest it. And so the regular consumption of the dairy is building up this bacteria and enzymes in your system that help you to then digest it and extract more nutrition from it. I love milk because it's a complete food. It's you're getting water, you're getting protein, you're getting fat and carbs all in the same thing, right? You can live off nothing but milk. Like cow's milk itself is it's beyond just being a food. It's so like liberating as what it can do for a family like in a third world country. Instead of like sending them food, there are like little like services and like charity organizations that they just buy them a goat so then they can just milk the goat, as opposed to a
Yes.
food that's gone tomorrow. The milk itself is this like liquid gold, jackpot of nutrition. It has all these minerals. It has the protein, fat, and carbs. It is, and like the fat soluble vitamins are such an important part of all this. And so the butter itself, right? So then if you go through that process of churning the butter, then you're getting a denser source of vitamin A, and liver is very high in vitamin A. Most people are very vitamin A deficient, which is why you see like a lot of foods like dairy, they'll add vitamin A and D to it when
Hmm.
those foods are already found in our animal foods, in their raw forms. And
Mm.
then when you go to yogurt, right, and cheese, when you make the fermented ones, now you're getting more of the vitamin K2, right? As Weston A. Price called like the factor X. Vitamin K is very important, and most people don't have any source of it whatsoever. And so when you're eating these foods, you're getting the fat soluble vitamins A, D, and K that are really only found in animal foods, because beta carotene, which is in carrots, is not the retinol that's
Right.
in your liver. And so your body has to convert beta carotene to retinol, and that's not an effective process for most people. The vitamin D that's in mushrooms is D2. It's not D3. And so your body has to convert it to D3. The vitamin K that's in spinach is K1, it's not K2. So your body has to turn it into the thing. And so that should be the source of the nutrient itself. Um, and if you get into the work of Weston A. Price, and he's looking at the teeth and the bone structure, the fat soluble vitamins are the most important thing for a jaw that develops properly so that the teeth don't get crowded. And I think that's like one of those really clear signs, especially because the mouth is that's where the food comes in through, right? And so it's almost like clear where the damage or the benefit is right there at the mouth. And
Mm.
when we think of people, earlier I was talking about, oh, we think our genetics have left us with this certain thing. Your bone structure of the face, which people, it's something that people really like to look to, is like, oh, that person's beautiful. When we think of beauty, we're thinking of this proportioned and symmetrical structure that everything has become full. It's why we like the cheekbones. Why it's like, on women you want those big cheekbones, on men you want that strong jaw. That literally comes from the fat soluble vitamins. And so to have child's first food from right from the beginning becoming, okay, they've had the breast milk, now give them a little bit of a little pateed liver, give them a little bit of egg yolk. Now we're supercharging
Yeah.
our children with the fat soluble vitamins as they're developing to become fully developed, a properly formed, beautiful human.
Well, that makes me feel really good about my first foods because, okay, that which brings me to my question, my real question. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't like liver. I mean, oysters, it lights me up. I love oysters. So hearing you say that, and I kind of knew that, and I'm lucky because I'm a huge fish person, and I could eat oysters for every meal. Um, Liver, I try, but I can't get myself to like it. Are there any hacks for the majority of people. Like I get so many messages on Instagram and they're like, "What do you do for liver?" Because the reason for my baby, it's because he didn't know anything different because that was just his first food. So we thought, "Oh, this is interesting," but for me, I
Right.
have all these other options. So my husband and myself, we're a bit hypocritical because we'll give it to the baby and then we kind of try and we're like, ugh, we know better, but we don't like
Yeah, so the live like this is a thing that comes up all the time.
it.
So I'm gonna start off in a place that most people probably necessarily wouldn't have expected. Um, the source of the liver itself is vital to both how healthy it is for you and how it tastes. Um, I started eating liver pretty much. I'd never eaten liver until I started eating it raw 8 years ago, and I was getting it from Whole Foods. When you realize what the liver does, one, people think like, oh, isn't that bad because it's like, all the toxins. Like it's a filter. It's not a storage place for
Right.
toxicity. So it's like it passes through. That's not really a problem so much. Um, but the the more toxic the cow is, it's going to affect the liver itself. And I'm going to choose my words carefully so this maybe doesn't get censored wherever this is posted. But if the cow that you're getting the liver from has been jabbed, which
Mm-hmm.
most livestock are, I noticed that the liver tastes a lot more metallic, and uh, it's very hard to get down. It's not palatable. When I started getting liver from local farms that don't do that, that taste was largely gone. It's a lot smoother, it's a lot milder, it's a lot sweeter. For that right there is a huge part, both in the taste and the health itself of the liver. So there are various farms like you could go on. Um, I mean, I've never tried U.S. wellness meats, but at least that the quality is going to be better. I know like things like White Oak Pastures delivered nationwide. There's a lot of places that you can buy the delivered to you if there's not a good local option. And then from that point, one, I recommend only eating raw liver raw as opposed to cooked. Um, and one of the best things that you could do is you can uh, cut it into like a very small piece, like a smaller than a bite-sized piece, to the size that it's basically like the size of a pill. And
Mm.
then you could literally just swallow it. You don't have to chew it. Liver is very soft, and you could just gulp it straight down, and you don't really taste it at all. Like it doesn't hit your tongue really, and it just kind of goes right down. um, a lot of people will cut up a bunch of liver and put it in the freezer and use that instead. I prefer to avoid having any of my food frozen so that it maintains as much of its nutrients and enzymes and bacteria as possible. So that's one method that you could do. Another is that you could take that liver, whether it be still fresh or frozen, and you can blend it into a milkshake. So you can throw it in
Ooh.
with raw milk. I know, I know. You could throw it in with raw milk and add honey to it. And a lot of people say that for some reason it makes it taste like a chocolate milkshake.
Okay.
And they say that that's a very simple, palatable way to get liver in.
Okay.
Um, I myself don't like the shake thing because then the milk kind of just tastes like liver the whole way. But
Yeah.
milk does uh, kind of neutralize the taste a bit. Like a very common practice has been soaking your liver in milk overnight and then cooking it the next day. So that's another option is you could
Okay.
soak the milk and liver and then cut it up into small pieces and then eat it the next day. It'll sort of extract some of that bitterness out of there. But I also think that you're losing some of the nutrition if you're not consuming the milk that it was soaked in. Um,
Mm.
so those are like various ways.
Okay.
My preferred way is to I'll take like a big chunk of liver like this and I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna eat this whole thing right now. And instead of using even a knife, I just take scissors and I slice the smallest little piece of it. Um, and I mean, I like to chew it a little bit, and I just like pop it in my mouth, chew it a little bit, swallow it, and I just cut another piece, and I kind of just do it like standing like over the kitchen counter, and like before you know it, you can take down 4, 6, 8 ounces of liver. For myself, that's just been the easiest way. Depending on my mood, I enjoy it more or less. You can grind it into meat. I'll take whatever like steak or whatever meat that I have, and I'll throw it in my food processor, and I'll add liver, kidney, heart, whatever, and I just blend it all together. And I don't cook it, though you could, but I just will take that and add like, some herbs and like a little like tomato or something, and just kind of eat it with a spoon, and it's pretty easy.
Kind of like a pate.
Yeah, so like you really are like turning the meat into a pate. It just depends on how. I kind of like to keep it at to like a ground consistency,
Right.
because if it gets like too mushy, then the texture kind of isn't that enjoyable. But it can be easier, it's more like baby food in that sense. And so it really is about what, however you can get it in is going to be better than not. So
Right.
if you take all of those methods, one of those should be, manageable. And
Yeah.
worst comes to worst, like plug your nose and just throw it in the back and swallow it. The health benefits are so worth it that, however people can do it, I just say go for it.
And if you did like, because I've seen the cutting up in like a pill form, how many little pills would you have to take in a day?
Well, I mean, there's not really like a certain amount. Like, some people eat like 2 ounces of liver every day. And then, like myself or people I know, I'll just sit down and eat 8 ounces or a pound of liver in one meal, and then maybe not eat liver for some period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with all of these things, like there isn't like oh, if you just eat this amount,
Right.
then you're good to go. It's gonna be specific to the person. But if you could do like, something that kind of looks like a golf ball size, if you could do that every day, and that's just like you wake up in the morning and you go down there and you get that down, however you have to get through it and carry on with your day, that's
Yeah.
probably a great place to start.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been so helpful, and I'm sure there's like so many places we could go to. But unfortunately, I have to sign off. So I want to ask, where can people find you? How can they get in contact with you? All of that good stuff.
You can follow me on social media on everything at Josh Rayner Gold. You can, if you don't have any questions, you can send me a DM, and then you can also email me at jrgvitality@gmail.com. I do health coaching. I tend to give away a lot of free information if you just send me a DM. So however, like you want to bother me for anything, I'm usually more than happy to give that away. And then I have my website at animalfoodplantmedicine.com. And at the moment, I really just have a shirt on there that's for sale. I have a few more shirt designs that I'm going to be releasing soon. And I have some books that I'm writing. I have one that's an introduction to eating raw,
Oh,
because
wow.
people usually have funny enough, it's not even something that we really touched on that much in this podcast, but people usually have so many questions. Once they've seen you eat a raw chicken, they like, okay, I have questions. And so,
Yeah.
instead of answering those every time, I'm just kind of hoping to have a book to kind of like solve like the how to get into it, the sourcing, that kind of stuff. And as well as um, a recipe book that will be coming alongside of it. So that will be out on my website soon.
I love that. Well, I'm going to link everything here because I'm sure you're going to get lots of inquiries here from people listening. But this has been so helpful, so empowering. I'm definitely going to. I am going to find a way to make the liver work, and then I'll get back to you on how my husband and myself are able to take it. But yeah, I really appreciate your time and all of your knowledge.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Of course.